So I'm going to be joined now by...
Please welcome McAuliffe, the Special Representative for Global Partnerships, for a framing conversation on public-private sector collaboration in international diplomacy and development.
So I wasn't sure I was going to be cued on that, Dorothy, so I guess I jumped the shark. Thank you very much.
You are the voice of God.
Yes, I am. So thank you. You will be the voice of God for this conversation. Thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for helping to convene this really important discussion on the importance of private partnerships in public diplomacy. Well, we're going to plumb a lot of different areas, but I'd love to use this conversation as a scene setter. So you are the special representative for the Office of Global Partnerships, which is a fantastic title. When you're sitting on a plane, chatting with someone, and they say, "So, what is it exactly you do in that role?" Maybe you could give us many of us here know implicitly how that works, but there are many folks who are listening and watching right now who don't. How do you explain what you do and why you do what you do?
Well, thank you, Andrew. It's a pleasure to be with everyone this morning. It's great to see a packed house here. And I first want to thank you for the partnership. We're talking about partnerships all day, all morning this morning, and I want to thank Foreign Policy for the partnership here and presenting this event. And also USAID, our colleagues at USAID. So it's State Department, USAID, and Foreign Policy today hosting this event and this opportunity to talk about how partnerships are a catalyst for change. So thank you for that. Also, if you'll allow me to indulge for just a moment, we have two of the original founders of the Office of Global Partnerships with us this morning, Chris Balderson, who was the first special representative of the Office of Global Partnerships, many of you know, and also my colleague, Deputy Managing Director, Deputy Special Representative Tomas Dabas, who is also a fixture in public service. Since we are in this building, I just want to call out Tomas for being a lifelong public servant and giving so much to USAID, State Department, and as well what is now the DFC. So he has quite a breadth, TD. So Office of Global Partnerships, you said an elevator speech, it's a little hard. But while I'm reading my Foreign Policy magazine on that airplane, and somebody next to me asked me, what is the Office of Global Partnerships? Basically, it's about how do we engage the private sector? How do we facilitate the building of partnerships to help us achieve our foreign policy and national security goals on behalf of the American people? And part of that, very important piece of that, is the leverage and the return on investment that we talk about, because we know we operate in a budget-constrained environment. We know we have to be responsible for how we achieve our foreign policy goals from a resource-constrained environment. But also, we know that foreign policy is much more effective. We engage the private sector to help us formulate that policy and implement on that policy. We know that government is limited in what it can and cannot do, especially in a rapidly changing, complex world, and especially when innovation is so critical, and the pace at which we operate to address these challenges is, in this modern age, very, very it's difficult for government to move at the pace that we need to move to solve problems and to implement. So we work with the private sector, and when we talk about the private sector, it's a very broad, it's Fortune 500 companies, but it's also universities, philanthropy, think tanks, diaspora groups, religious groups. It's across the board, anything that is not USG. So I think that's a really important definition.
Wonderful, thank you for explaining. So you've been in this role now for 2+ years, and the office is actually 15 years old this year. Very exciting, and I do remember meeting with my friend Tomas and Chris. Good to see you, Chris. 15 years ago at the State Department, we were talking about setting up this office, and it was I was with the Financial Times at that point, so this is going way back now, and it's fantastic to see all the wonderful work that you've done and everything that you've achieved in your 2 years here. Now that you've been working on this, what has excited you about what you've achieved and some of the partnerships that you've set up? Maybe you could share with us an example.
Well, I think the most exciting thing was when I walked in the door and I saw the history and learned, focusing on the history of the office, 1,800 partnerships over the last 15 years, nearly $4 billion leveraged. Really important statistic for us to continue to build on. So The other thing that I think is really important is that now that office was a novel idea at the time. It was an innovative part of government to think about to institutionalize public-private partnerships. And now what we've seen is that it's become just very commonplace within the State Department itself. Most of our large bureaus have partnership offices. Most of our agencies have partnership offices because we know that we've helped bake in this culture and this idea that we need the private sector to help us advance. So we have a number of public-private partnerships that I could call out.
They're all special.
They're all very unique, special, effective. Not everyone works. We have to be realistic about that. But I think there's still value in the work of consultation and engaging with the private sector. Whether an actual formal partnership comes to bear, there's still learning that happens, and there is still the engagement is important. Some of you asked, I could just talk about, I just got back from Vienna last week. We have a really exciting partnership that we have formed called the @Prevent Alliance. Is one of the Secretary's very high priorities is the fentanyl crisis in the United States. And how do we work with our international partners, and how do we work with the tech companies and their platforms to help us prevent the use, abuse, trafficking, access to fentanyl, especially with young people. And so Meta actually approached us. We also have Snap as a formal partner, as well as X. And we are working with UNODC, which is the UN Office of Drugs and Crime, as well as INL within the State Department. And I just got back from Vienna, where we've already signed the MOU, thanks to the very good work of our colleagues. Kate Clemens is in the room. But we actually had the first technical meetings with the UNODC and others, and inviting experts from universities who have studied this issue and and how to prevent abuse over the last many years. And so this has now all come to bear, and it's actually moving forward. So that's just one example. I know we don't have much time.
So did you say you got Meta, Snap, and X in a room working together?
Yes, exactly.
That's a very interesting
And
dynamic.
Meta came to us, which is actually, I think, says a lot.
So in addition to partnering with private parties, external organizations, corporates in this example, to solve a problem, you're getting them adversaries generally to work together on those issues.
Yes.
There's probably not a lot of fora where they can do that kind of thing.
Exactly. We're very proud of this partnership, and we have very big hopes for. It's a very challenging problem, very complex problem, but we know that at least being in the room, talking with technical experts, helping use their platforms, we're optimistic and we're hopeful, and that's what this is all about.
It's also very interesting to hear that organizations are coming to you with these ideas now on how to solve for this.
Exactly, and that's part of the culture piece.
And that's a wonderful thing to hear, which I think must be have a lot of promise and hold forth a lot of promise for the future. What are you excited about going forward? I know there's lots of different areas and sectors that you're focused on. Climate change, one of the biggest problems we're trying to get our arms around right now. What kind of trends and directions do you think you'll see going forward in partnerships with state in particular in the coming days?
Certainly there's a very big focus on technology, and how does technology, how it's cross-cutting across so many of the issues and challenges and opportunities that we're dealing with. Climate change is a big one, and we're very excited to have launched 9 innovation hubs around the world where we're focused on lifting up and supporting entrepreneurs locally across the developing world and how they are actually bringing their problems, their solutions on climate to bear to impact their local communities, and to actually create a network across the world where these hubs can eventually connect with each other. And it's all about how do we mentor them, so we have large companies, Salesforce, for example, others who are mentoring and providing access to mentoring, access to capital, tips. How do we train them to figure out how to present their financial models to increase access to capital, which is the one large note we hear all the time is there are so many great ideas out there in the world, so many opportunities to create jobs and to solve these challenges, but how do we actually get the capital to where it needs to be to make a difference, to allow these entrepreneurs to to let their companies get to market and to grow.
That's great to hear. And one last point, just looking forward as well towards how do you make these sustainable? Is the life cycle of a partnership one? 15 years we've been working on this. I don't know if we could call out one that's still in existence from 15 years ago. They go through cycles of these efforts. How do you
Yes.
make them sustainable?
So I think that the whole point about engaging the private sector is the private sector doesn't do anything unless it makes sense for them. And they're always looking for sustainability, right? They're looking at their models for 3 years out, 5 years out, 10 years out. So by engaging the private sector per se, we are actually creating sustainability. We have a partnership, one of my very favorites, and I know we have some folks in the room, TE Connectivity, and we have the Caterpillar Foundation, and that is the Girl Up YSI program that we run. It's both leadership training and introduction to STEAM education and promoting STEAM education. I think the leadership piece of that is actually the sustainability part, because these girls come, they have an incredible experience. They get access to STEAM curriculum, but they also get the leadership training, which they take back. Many of them have WhatsApp groups and other ways that they're communicating within their community and encouraging other girls to be front-footed about STEAM education and leadership.
That's great. And we do have a special section on that later, so
Yes,
you stick around
yes.
and listen to that one. Well, that's wonderful and a great scene setter for why we're doing this, the success of partnerships, what gets you excited as well. And as you mentioned, we've been doing this for a while and it's been sustainable, and there are a lot of people who've contributed to the beginnings of this. You pointed out a few of the folks who are in the room right now, but you wanted to introduce a special message from someone who played a key role in setting this up.
I do indeed, and that is Secretary Clinton, who could not be with us here today, but she was instrumental in the implementation of the first Global Partnerships Initiative, which then became the Office of Global Partnerships, which Chris and TD led at that time. And she saw the need for the strengthening of foreign policy through collaboration with the private sector, saw the sustainability piece, saw the innovation piece, and really was a true leader and embraced that office and really made it her own personal tool to advance on a number of issues. One of the most famous, well-known, is the Cook Stove Initiative, which is still ongoing. Now over $4 billion in resources, and I think it's over 200 partners or something that are now around the world. It's now housed at the UN, but it's an amazing initiative, and when I go around the world, I still hear and meet local partners who are actively engaged in the Cook Stove Initiative, but there were so many others, and it really was her understanding that the private sector is absolutely key to advancing foreign policy and national security for the American people. So without further ado, I'd like you to turn your attention to the screen for a message from Secretary Clinton.
Thank you so much, Special Representative Dorothy McAuliffe, for the kind introduction and for your leadership of the Office of Global Partnerships. I also want to thank the Department of State, USAID, and Foreign Policy for bringing everyone together for this important forum. 15 years ago, I had the privilege of launching the Global Partnership Initiative at the State Department to strengthen foreign policy, maximize foreign aid impact, and encourage collaborative problem solving. I then set up the Global Partnerships Initiative, now the state's Office of Global Partnerships, because I wanted the State Department to collaborate more actively across governments, civil society, and the private sector. We recognized that in the 21st century, diplomacy and development are not confined to government relations, that we really needed an all-hands-on-deck approach. During my time as Secretary of State, I had the honor of kicking off several very successful partnerships, many of which still exist today. For example, in 2011, we launched the Global Equality Fund to promote and protect the human rights of LGBTQ people around the world. Today, the fund provides small grants, emergency assistance, and long-term support to people and organizations under threat in over 100 countries. The longevity and impact of the fund is made possible by our partnership with 18 partner governments and private sector entities like the John D. Evans Foundation, the Royal Bank of Canada, Marriott International, Out Leadership, and many more. I'm also proud that in 2010, we organized a public-private partnership that distributed millions of clean cook stoves to families across the world. At the time, household air pollution was responsible for more than twice as many premature deaths as malaria and tuberculosis combined. A year after the Clean Cook Stove Alliance was formed, a group of women in Chennai, India, showed me what a difference the new stoves were making in their lives. They burned hotter, needed less fuel, and produced far less dangerous smoke than their old stoves. That is the power of public-private partnerships to develop and scale innovative solutions that improve people's lives. And today, the Office of Global Partnerships continues to inspire innovative approaches to diplomacy and development. And the private sector is playing an unprecedented role in advancing peace, security, stability, and prosperity around the world. I applaud all of you gathered today who are already partners with the State Department and USAID. And I encourage others to consider how your organization can use its strength and expertise to help solve today's challenges and help us build a more peaceful, prosperous tomorrow. Thank you all very much, and best wishes for an impactful forum.
That was wonderful. Thank you, Special Representative McAuliffe. Great to hear the Secretary's words, and I agree.